The champagne bubbles felt like tiny explosions against my lips as I watched Victoria Sterling's perfectly glossed mouth form the words that would change everything. The crystal chandelier above cast prismatic light across her face, making her look almost angelic as she delivered what she clearly thought was my death sentence. "Ladies," she announced to the gathered crowd of Manhattan's most influential women, her voice carrying that particular blend of sweetness and venom that only comes from decades of private school training. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." 37 pairs of eyes turned toward me, wine glasses suspended mid-sip, conversations dying like snuffed candles. I felt my pulse in my fingertips as I gripped the stem of my champagne flute, the one Victoria had personally handed me with that predatory smile 20 minutes earlier. "We all know why Maya Rodriguez is really here tonight," Victoria continued, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she gestured dismissively in my direction. "She thinks that sleeping with my ex-husband and stealing him away entitles her to a seat at our table. But darling," she paused for effect, savoring the moment like fine wine, "you can't buy class, and you certainly can't marry into it when you're nothing but a glorified secretary who got lucky." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own breathing, could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as every woman in that room waited to see how the interloper would respond to being put in her place by Manhattan royalty. I set my champagne glass down on the marble-topped table with deliberate care, the soft clink seeming to echo in the vast silence of Victoria's penthouse. 7 years of strategic planning crystallized in that moment. Every rejection, every snub, every whispered comment about my background had led to this. "Thank you, Victoria," I said, standing slowly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Thank you for reminding me exactly why I've worked so hard to never need your approval." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the script she'd expected. "You're absolutely right about one thing," I continued, reaching for my purse. "I am just a secretary who got lucky. Lucky enough to recognize real love when I found it. Lucky enough to build something meaningful while others inherited their relevance. And lucky enough to understand that power earned carries more weight than power inherited." The room remained frozen, but I could see the shift in several faces. Curiosity replacing anticipation. "Enjoy your evening, ladies. I'm sure you have many important committee meetings to plan." I smiled with genuine warmth. After all, someone has to make the real decisions while you debate the color of napkins. Marcus was waiting by my car, his face creasing with concern when he saw my expression. "Maya, what happened?" I fell into his arms, breathing in his familiar scent of sandalwood and coffee, letting myself feel safe for just a moment before the war began. "Your ex-wife decided to give me a lesson in knowing my place," I said against his chest. His whole body tensed. "What exactly did she say?" "Nothing that surprised me. Everything that confirmed what I already knew." I pulled back to look at him. "Marcus, I need you to trust me on something. Always. Don't call her. Don't defend me. Don't try to fix this." "Maya, I can't just let her." "Yes, you can." I touched his face. "Because this isn't about her anymore. This is about me deciding who I really am. And more importantly, who I'm going to become." He studied my face, seeing something there that made him nod slowly. In 7 years together, he learned to recognize when Maya Rodriguez, the woman who'd built a business empire from nothing, was about to make a move. "What do you need me to do?" "Love me while I handle this my way." I was already making calls before we reached his apartment. "James, it's Maya." "I know it's late." My attorney's voice was immediately alert. James Chin had been with me since the beginning, since before anyone knew that the quiet secretary at Sterling and Associates had been building something extraordinary in the shadows. "What's the situation? How quickly can we move on the Blackstone acquisition?" Silence. Then, "Maya, we agreed to wait 6 months. Let the market calm down after Hartford." The market just gave me a new timeline. "How quickly?" "If we activate the standby team tonight, we could have papers ready by Monday morning." "But Maya, this is Victoria Sterling's crown jewel. Her late father's legacy. This is nuclear." "I know." I walked to Marcus's window, looking out at the glittering city that had once seemed so impossibly vast. "Send the offer." 25% over market value. Make it impossible for the board to refuse. The shareholders will think you're either crazy or desperate. The shareholders will think I'm decisive. Victoria will know I'm dangerous. I could hear James typing furiously, his team probably already being pulled from their Sunday evening plans. Anything else? Remember that diversity audit we conducted on Sterling and Associates 3 years ago? The one that documented their hiring patterns. The one Victoria made disappear? It's time for it to reappear. Anonymous leak to the Business Journal, Times, and Post. Monday morning, same time as the Blackstone announcement. Maya. James's voice carried 7 years of shared battles. This is total war. She fired the first shot when she decided to humiliate me publicly. I'm just responding with superior firepower. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that makes Manhattan feel like the center of the universe. I dressed in my armor, a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than Victoria's monthly charity budget, the Louboutin heels that added exactly the right amount of height, and my grandmother's pearl earrings, the only inheritance from a woman who'd cleaned offices so I could someday own them. By 8:30 a.m., my assistant Julia was fielding calls from reporters, investment bankers, and very nervous board members. The Times wants a statement about the acquisition, she said, balancing 3 phones and looking remarkably calm for someone managing controlled chaos. Tell them Rodriguez Holdings is excited to honor Blackstone's legacy while expanding its vision for the future. The Journal wants to know if the timing is related to the Sterling hiring scandal. Tell them Rodriguez Holdings doesn't comment on other companies' internal policies, but we're proud of our own commitment to merit-based advancement. At exactly 9 a.m., Victoria Sterling walked into my office like a woman approaching her own execution. Gone was the imperious confidence from Friday night. In its place was something I'd never seen from her before, genuine fear. Maya, she began, then stopped, seeming to realize that my name had never sounded right in her mouth before this moment. Victoria, please sit. She lowered herself into the chair as if it might be booby-trapped. Her attorney, Richard Morrison, old school, old money, old strategies, looked like a man who'd just realized his weapon of choice was a sword in a gunfight. I think we can resolve this misunderstanding, Victoria said, her voice lacking its usual authority. What misunderstanding would that be? Friday night, I was emotional. The divorce, seeing Marcus with someone new, the stress of managing the company alone stop. I held up my hand. Victoria, I respect you too much to let you embarrass yourself with revisionist history. Her perfectly applied foundation couldn't hide the flush that crept up her neck. You weren't emotional. You were calculated. You waited until you had the perfect audience, chose your words for maximum impact, and delivered them with the precision of someone who's spent a lifetime wielding social power as a weapon. I stood and walked to the window, my city sprawling below us like a chessboard where I'd just moved my queen into checkmate position. The problem isn't that you insulted me, Victoria. The problem is that you fundamentally misunderstood who you were insulting. Her attorney cleared his throat. Ms. Rodriguez, perhaps we could discuss terms. The terms are simple. I turned back to face them. Sterling and Associates will continue to operate under the Rodriguez Holdings umbrella. You'll retain your title and a generous salary, but all major decisions will flow through the parent company. You'll also implement a comprehensive diversity and inclusion program with targets and accountability measures. You're dismantling everything my father built, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm completing what your father started. He built a company that could thrive in his generation. I'm making sure it survives in mine. Victoria's eyes filled with tears she was too proud to shed. And if I refuse? Then Sterling and Associates closes at the end of the month. Its assets are liquidated, and its employees find new positions with Rodriguez Holdings subsidiaries, all except senior management, of course. The calculation was visible on her face. Pride versus survival. Legacy versus humiliation. I need time to consider. You have until 5 p.m. today. The press conference announcing the new structure is scheduled for tomorrow morning with or without your cooperation. They left without another word, Victoria's heels clicking against the marble with none of their usual confidence. 3 days later, The business section of the New York Times ran a feature story with the headline, "The Rise of Maya Rodriguez, How a Secretary Became Manhattan's Most Powerful Woman." The article traced my journey from night school at Hunter College to building Rodriguez Holdings into a multi-billion-dollar empire. It mentioned my innovative employee development programs, my track record of turning around struggling companies, and my reputation for fierce loyalty to those who earned it. Buried in the middle was a single paragraph about the Sterling acquisition, noting that it represented a changing of the guard in old money Manhattan circles. Victoria had signed the papers Tuesday evening, her signature shaky but final. Marcus found me in my office that Friday, reading congratulatory messages from business leaders who'd once barely acknowledged my existence. "Any regrets?" he asked, settling into the chair Victoria had occupied just days earlier. "About us? Never." I looked up from my computer. "About this? Ask me in a year." "She called me yesterday." I raised an eyebrow. "She wanted to know if you'd planned this from the beginning, if you'd targeted her specifically. What did you tell her?" Marcus smiled. "I told her that Maya Rodriguez doesn't need to target anyone. She just builds something so impressive that everyone else's petty games become irrelevant." 6 months later, Sterling and Associates had its most profitable quarter in company history. Victoria, to her credit, had thrown herself into learning about the new reality with the same intensity she'd once applied to social climbing. The diversity program had brought an extraordinary talent, the employee satisfaction scores had skyrocketed, and clients were responding to the company's revitalized energy. I still received the occasional cutting remark at social events, whispered comments about new money and social climbers. But now they came with an undercurrent of respect and sometimes fear. A year after that night at Victoria's penthouse, I found myself at another charity gala, this one for the scholarship fund Rodriguez Holdings had established for first-generation college students. Victoria was there, having become an unlikely champion of the program after one of its first recipients had revolutionized Sterling's client relations department. She approached me during the cocktail hour, looking remarkably like the woman who'd once held court in Manhattan's most exclusive circles, but with something new in her bearing, humility. "Maya," she said, and my name sounded natural in her mouth for the first time. "Could I speak with you privately?" We stepped onto the terrace overlooking Central Park, the autumn air crisp with possibility. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "Not because you now control my livelihood, but because I was wrong. About you, about what matters, about everything." "Victoria, please, let me finish." She gripped the railing. "I spent my entire life believing that where you came from determined where you could go. That breeding mattered more than ambition, that connections trumped capability. You proved me wrong in the most spectacular way possible. The city stretched out below us, millions of lights representing millions of dreams, millions of people building their own empires one strategic decision at a time. You didn't just beat me, Maya. You obsoleted me. And somehow, in the process, you saved me from becoming completely irrelevant. You're not irrelevant, Victoria. You're evolving. Into what? Into someone who earns respect instead of demanding it." She was quiet for a long moment. "The girl who won the first Rodriguez scholarship, Keisha from Brooklyn, she reminds me of you. Hungry, brilliant, absolutely fearless. What about her?" "She asked me something last week that I couldn't answer. She wanted to know how I'd found the courage to reinvent myself at 63. Victoria smiled ruefully. I told her I'd had an excellent teacher. 2 years after that night, Rodriguez Holdings occupied the top 15 floors of the building that had once housed Sterling and Associates. Victoria ran the foundation that bore both our names, turning her social connections into genuine philanthropic impact. Marcus and I had been married for 8 months, our wedding a celebration that brought together tech entrepreneurs and old money families, scholarship recipients and society mavens, creating something entirely new in the process. The thank you note arrived on a Tuesday, handwritten on Victoria's personal stationery. "Maya, thank you for teaching me the difference between being powerful and being important. The woman I was would have hated the woman I'm becoming." The woman I'm becoming is grateful for the chance to matter in ways that actually count. I framed it and hung it next to my college diploma, both reminders of transformations that had seemed impossible until they became inevitable. Some stories are about revenge. Others are about justice. But the best stories I've learned are about the moment when someone realizes they have the power to rewrite the rules entirely. Victoria Sterling had tried to teach me my place. Instead, she'd learned that in the new Manhattan, places aren't assigned by birthright, they're earned by vision, claimed by courage, and kept by the relentless pursuit of something larger than yourself. The secretary who got lucky had become the CEO who planned ahead. The woman who'd been dismissed as new money had become the architect of a new definition of what money could accomplish. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, your greatest enemy becomes your most important teacher. The last laugh wasn't mine or Victoria's. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong somewhere and decided to build somewhere better instead. 5 years after that pivotal night, I stood in the same penthouse where Victoria had once tried to destroy me. But now it was mine, purchased not out of spite, but because it had come up for sale when Victoria downsized to focus on her foundation work. The space had been transformed. Where once hung portraits of Sterling ancestors, now displayed photographs of Rodriguez Holdings scholarship recipients at their graduations. The formal dining room had become a conference space where we hosted quarterly mentorship dinners for young entrepreneurs. Mrs. Sterling Rodriguez, my assistant, announced, using the hyphenated name that still made people do double takes, "Your 3 o'clock is here." Keisha Washington walked in with the same hungry confidence I remembered from my own early days. At 25, she'd already launched 2 successful startups and was seeking backing for her third, a platform connecting underrepresented entrepreneurs with angel investors. "Ms. Rodriguez," she said, her handshake firm and direct. "Thank you for seeing me. Please call me Maya. And thank you for choosing Rodriguez Holdings for your pitch." As she presented her business plan, I saw myself 15 years earlier, brilliant, determined, and absolutely convinced that hard work could overcome any obstacle. The difference was that Keisha had mentors, had examples, had a roadmap that women like me had carved out through trial and error. "What's your biggest concern?" I asked when she finished. "Honestly, that I'll get so focused on proving I belong that I'll forget why I started this in the first place." I smiled. That's exactly the right concern to have. It means you understand that success without purpose is just expensive emptiness. After she left, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd been that night in Victoria's penthouse, so focused on proving my worth that I nearly lost sight of what truly mattered. Victoria and I had developed an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. She'd learned to channel her social influence into meaningful change, while I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is lift others up instead of tearing opponents down. Marcus found me on the terrace that evening, watching the sun set over the city that had tested us both. "Penny for your thoughts?" Just thinking about how different things could have been if I'd let anger drive my decisions instead of ambition. "Any regrets?" About taking over her company? No. About how I almost let hatred consume me in the process. Every day, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. "That's why you're remarkable, you know. You won, but you didn't let winning change who you are." The following week, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. Victoria was hosting a dinner for the city's most influential women, the same crowd that had witnessed my humiliation years earlier. The invitation was handwritten. "Maya, I'd be honored if you'd join us as our keynote speaker. The theme is redefining power. When the rules change, who changes with them?" I can think of no one better qualified to address this topic. With respect and gratitude, Victoria, the evening of the dinner, I stood before the same group of women, but everything had changed. Some faces were familiar, others were new, younger, more diverse, representing the shifting landscape of power in our city. "Ladies," I began, and I could see Victoria smiling from the front row. "I was last in this room 5 years ago, when someone tried to teach me my place. Tonight, I want to talk about what I learned from that experience." I paused, looking around the room at faces that were attentive rather than judgmental. I learned that our places in this world aren't predetermined by our zip codes or our parents' bank accounts. They're determined by our willingness to create value, to lift others up, and to understand that true power isn't about keeping others out. It's about building something so meaningful that everyone wants to be part of it. The applause was genuine, warm, transformative. Later, as I was leaving, Victoria caught my arm. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For showing me that the best way to honor my father's legacy wasn't to preserve it exactly as he left it, but to make it worthy of the world he'd want his granddaughter to inherit." As I drove home through the city that had once seemed so daunting, I realized that the secretary who got lucky had become something else entirely. A woman who understood that the most profound victories aren't about defeating your enemies, but about creating a world where the battles that once seemed necessary become obsolete. If you enjoyed this story of transformation, ambition, and finding your own power, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life inspired tales that explore what it means to overcome the odds and redefine success on your own terms. Have you ever faced a moment when someone tried to put you in your place? How did you respond? And what do you think about Maya's approach? Was she justified in her actions, or did she go too far? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss the complex dynamics of power, respect, and revenge in our modern world. If you want to see more stories like this that dive deep into real human struggles and triumphs, hit that like button to let me know this resonated with you. Your engagement helps me understand what stories matter most to you.